Hi guys, it is Tamara. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about parental borderline personality disorder. And the foundation of this topic is going to be trauma. Everything we talk about on the channel is trauma-based in the first place, but this particular topic is going to highlight some of the traumatic behaviors that these kind of parents display with children, adolescents, and even adult children. And it's pretty traumatic, some of the ins and outs of borderline personality disorder, trying to understand, what's wrong with this family member and why they're behaving as they're behaving. So in today's video, I'm going to highlight this topic, but I'm going to talk specifically about parents. So let's go ahead and jump into this video. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For those who are subscribed and participating, thank you so much. And for those who are new, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you can stick around with us and be a part of our growing and validating community. And in case you don't know who I am, let me go ahead and briefly introduce myself. My name is Tamara, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist, but I also am licensed in mental health, and I work with children, teens, and families. There's a couple of things that I want you guys to think of in terms of parents being traumatic. I think a lot of people believe that parents are great, they're wonderful, nothing is wrong with a parent. If the parent has any issues, it's not going to impact the child. The child's a child, stay in a child's place. The child doesn't understand everything that they should anyway. The child will never know, right? They'll never find out. Like, there's a host of excuses for bad parents and emotionally unstable parents and unavailable parents and, parents who are just not living up to their title as a mother or as a father, right? There's a lot of ways that we can justify it, but I don't believe in justifying negative parents. I believe they need to know from the start, the moment that they walk into my door, that, they're not doing something right. And I like to, of course, talk to them in a diplomatic manner. But they also need to know from somebody who is more objective that was a wrong move, or that was the wrong thing to say, or why would you do that? It's like, these kind of parents really need guidance. Either they were not raised correctly themselves, or they were abused and traumatized, or they just don't know what they're doing, and they should never have become a parent. I mean, there's many ways that we can look at unstable and imbalanced and unbalanced and all of that, right? Those kind of parents, there's many ways we can look at that. But I tend to zone in on the child, whether that's a child, a teen, an entire family unit, or an adult child. I tend to zone in on them because they're the ones who are the victims of trauma. And the brain has been rewired by that traumatic experience with that parent. So, this tends to happen in homes where there's severe mental illness. This also tends to happen in homes where there is PTSD with the parent, substance abuse, but also parents who are just strictly emotionally unavailable. And sadly, sometimes those are parents with borderline personality traits. So, I'm going to give you a listing of traumatic behaviors that these parents engage in, and you most likely can relate to them. Let me know in the comment section below if you can relate. But the first thing that I've noticed about these kind of parents, and I have it on my list here, is that they struggle with relational boundaries. Okay, and I have two things listed here, and I've worked with these kind of parents over the years. The two things is over idolization, or they over idolize you, right? Idolize you, right? They see you as their idol. I should put it that way. Okay. They kind of elevate you to a level of God or goddess, right? And then the other side of that is polarized thinking. And then sometimes they engage in devaluing the person. So here's how it goes. The individual, let's say the parent, right? They absolutely love their child, right? They are in love with this baby, beautiful, skin and straight hair, and they smell so good, and they're so loving, and they're so beautiful and so sweet, and they're just so cuddly, right? Most of us love babies, right? So let's say this parent is so in love with you as their child. They elevate you to level of God almost. Nothing in this world matters but you. The moment you start crying and needing them and requiring their attention and really relying on them as the parent, they devalue you. They start yelling, they get angry, they neglect you, they refuse to help you, they push you off onto other people, primarily the spouse or the grandparents or the in-laws. And, they totally avoid being a parent. So they value you. And then on the flip side, when it's time for them to give of themselves, then they begin to devalue you. You're not as important anymore. Now, polarized thinking is black and white thinking. There's no gray. So a baby who's crying or a little girl who's 6 years old and needs mom's help is not going to get that, because the polarized thinking of a parent with borderline personality disorder says this: while I know you're a child and you need me, I don't want you to need me. So I'm going to neglect you and I'm going to act like you don't exist. And on top of that, I'm going to go around and act like I don't have responsibilities. And I'm going to be okay with that. There's no gray, there's no reality here that I'm a parent, that I have to be, that you're a child and you need me. I don't consider that. I consider it in black and white polarized, terms, right? You need me. I don't want you to need me. It's always black and white. And so these kind of parents end up with a relational pattern of abuse and neglect with their child. It's not a healthy parent-child relationship, okay? The next thing that I have here is unstable identity. Now, there's two things I want you to think about here. One is dangerous impulsivity, and we're talking about recklessness and drug use and sexual experiences that are not appropriate, right? Reactions and responses that are unwarranted, throwing things and having, rage experiences where nothing is able to be rationalized with this particular parent. Eating disorders is another thing that I have here under unstable identity, right? They have terrible anger management, terrible impulse control, but they may also have eating disorders. Now, some research suggests that eating disorders come about because there's certain chemicals in the brain that are not being correctly fostered by our system when we're refusing to eat. So when we don't eat, the way I want you to look at this concept is this way. When you don't eat, your body doesn't get the nutrients and the brain chemicals that it needs to function well. And some research suggests that because of that, eating disorders are maintained. It's more of a chemical process. It's a mind-body connection. Other people claim, and other research studies suggest, that eating disorders have a lot to do with a need for control. When you don't have that control in another way, then you do it by, needing to control your diet, right? So a lot of people with borderline personality disorder end up not only engaging in dangerous impulsive acts and reckless behavior, but sometimes eating disorders that really causes them to be irritable. It reduces their ability to be logical and reason, and it also reduces their mood. They're irritable, they're cranky, they're unable to be reasoned with because they are low on chemicals in their body that food gives them, right? Their metabolism is low. So there's a lot going on there. And if you're a purger, if the parent is a purger, right? Somebody who, purges their food, makes it come back up, you're really not getting nutrients in your body. And so then you're really not able to process and think and rationalize. It gets pretty bad. Okay. So that's the next thing. The third thing that I have here, guys, or the fourth thing, is recurrent suicidal ideation and self-injurious behaviors. Here we go right here. Suicidal ideation and self-injurious behaviors. This is a constant with parents who have borderline personality disorder. Actually, it's a hallmark feature of the disorder in and of itself. Suicidal ideation may consist of having suicidal thoughts every time the person perceives danger, whether that's true or not. You guys who follow me and have been with me for years on this channel know very well that I tend to focus mainly on the trauma response and the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. I talk about it more extensively right up here in this video. But when we talk about that system, I usually say that the system is triggered by a perception of danger, a perception that is unwarranted, right? A perception that says, uh-oh, red flag, we're in danger, okay? And so that kind of happens with individuals with borderline personality disorder. They perceive things in a skewed fashion, they get upset, they get overwhelmed, and their emotions are much bigger than they need to be. And so they end up having suicidal thoughts, and sometimes they become so impulsive and reckless that they actually attempt it. And then there's a history of suicide attempts, and that opens up the door to further suicide attempts, because research suggests that if you've attempted suicide once, you're likely to do it again in the future. Past behavior predicts future behavior in this sense. Okay. The next thing, guys, is self-injurious behaviors, and that's cutting and burning oneself and really hurting oneself in a way that, you should not be hurting yourself. So these particular parents are really unstable. If a child gets on their nerves too much, they're going to resort to cutting. They're going to resort to suicidal thoughts, and it's a downward spiral. It's a rabbit hole. And unfortunately, these unstable parents can't help it. Unfortunately, the next thing is affective instability. Okay, so affect, AFFECT, so emotional instability. And I also have here reactivity. So these kind of parents are so emotionally unstable and reactive that they don't stop and process what's going on. They just react. And usually a child being raised in an environment where the parent is more reactive than they are logical, there's going to be a lot of emotional and psychological abuse in that household. There are some parents, the minute they're called mommy by the child, I need something, they snap. And these are the kind of parents that yell and scream and slam doors and abuse and threaten and harm, right? Because they don't want to have to be a parent. So, reactive parents and parents who are unstable emotionally, affective instability, are really hard to have in therapy because they don't see what the problem is for the majority of the time, and because they're impulsive, they really can't control themselves. So these kind of parents are complicated. They need really specialized treatment to help them. The next is chronic fear of abandonment. These kind of parents create parentified children in their home, right? The children become the parents because the parents have no idea how to be a parent. And so the child doesn't have any other choice but to be grown and to really accelerate their development emotionally and psychologically into adulthood. That's the sad part, right? These kind of parents fear abandonment so much that they may try to entrap the child or, try to control or keep the child bound by, schemes and tricks and manipulation and trauma. Sometimes that fear of abandonment can be very, very manipulative. Doesn't always mean that the person with borderline personality disorder is evil. Sometimes, yes, they do very evil things, but it doesn't mean that everybody is like that. But when you have a parent who has a fear of abandonment, they may go to whatever level they need to go to keep what they want, okay? The next is feelings of emptiness and disproportionate anger. Feelings of emptiness and disproportionate anger. I think that's quite explanatory, that internal feeling of just complete gloom and doom. There's nothing that's going to help me, right? I'm going to feel alone and just empty always. I had a parent years ago when I worked in a school district, and the parent said to me, the reason I don't let my son have his sleepovers is because I don't want to be lonely at home. Very selfish. And that child remained at home in his bedroom, locked upstairs, playing video games for the next 15 years of his life. And I almost can guarantee you that he's still there. It's because the mother did not like to feel alone. So her persistent and frequent feelings of emptiness really kept him bound by her. And the disproportionate anger just intimidated him. And so he could do nothing but give in. The next is paranoia and dissociation and extreme avoidance. These kind of parents don't like to know that they are harmful. They don't like to hear that they're doing something wrong. So, they're going to avoid any kind of confrontation. Even if it's a family intervention, they're going to avoid it. They have a hard time with accountability, and they never wanted to be a parent in the first place for some of them, if not most. And so when you address them about their poor parenting, that's the last thing they want to hear. So they close the door on you. They slam the door. And what was the other one? The paranoia and the dissociation, that's a possibility as well. They just kind of pull away from reality. I talk about dissociation right up here. And I also talk about psychotic and unhealthy parents right up here. And you can learn a little bit more about these particular terms. Thank you so much for being with me today, guys, in this video. I encourage you to give it a thumbs up if it was helpful, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stick around with us, and that bell button, because that's going to let you know when I upload a video, so you can stick around and get more information, and you can keep up with all the updates that's happening on the channel and behind the scenes. So thank you so much for being with me again. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.